True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
When Jan Roseboro's husband, Michael, found her unconscious and bleeding in their new swimming pool, there was no reason to suspect him of anything nefarious. Even though his 911 call was unusual, it wasn't proof of a crime. But then a motive for murder was discovered. Michael's lover, Angela Funk. When Angela's computer and phone records were examined, thousands of romantic and lustful messages with Michael Roseboro were discovered, and in these messages he professed his love for her and his desire to marry her. In fact, he was planning to leave Jan and ask for a divorce on July 22nd, the day Jan died. Join us at the quiet end for Lady in the Water, the murder of Jan Roseboro. Within days of Jan's death, investigators decided that Michael Roseboro had beaten and strangled his wife before tossing her into the pool to drown. All of this happened while their 3 small children slept inside the home. Michael's family and his lover didn't believe that Michael could do such a thing, but Jan's family had no doubts that Michael had killed Jan in order to be with his mistress and keep his wealth. And there were really some good points on both sides.
Well, that might be, but if he divorced her, he was going to lose a lot.
Yes, a lot of money, possibly his children,
possibly
his business.
Mm-hmm. It would have been difficult, so, not that I'm condoning what he did.
Well, thank you, yeah.
But, yeah, it's tough. Got a good beer today. It's called Dirt Wolf from Victory Brewing Company in Downingtown, PA. This is an Imperial IPA that measures in at 8.7% alcohol by volume. Nice amber color, white head, plenty of lace. There's a good aroma, sweet fruit, and some piney hops. Now, before you go off on me about that pine, it's subtle. Tastes of mango, pineapple, tiny bit of pine, a nice background of bread. Fruity, and the hops are subtle. I think you'd like it. We're going to try it anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too bad. I'm willing. Let's open it first.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
It's a pretty beer.
Well, I always like IPAs. They're visually really nice looking ones. Although these hazy ones I'm not real sure of. But most of the time you get a nice clear gold or amber color, good head, plenty of lacing. It's a pretty beer.
All right. So why don't you join me down here at the quiet end? It's really good to be back. 2 weeks off. We haven't done that in a while.
Jeez. I was starting to have some withdrawal, I think.
Well, I don't know how. You were still writing to people and getting feedback together, so.
I was, but it's not the same as taping an episode.
No, you're right. It's not.
So it is good to be back. Let's get started.
Okay.
So both Jan Binkley and Michael Roseboro grew up living lives of privilege. Jan's father, Samuel Binkley, owned the Denver National Bank in the area where she grew up, and this is the town of Denver, Pennsylvania. Michael's family had owned and operated the respected and profitable Roseboro Funeral Home for over a century. So both these folks are pretty long-term residents with a history in the area.
Oh, yeah, very prominent, really, in that small town of Denver, Pennsylvania.
Right. Now, the 2 families, the Binkleys and the Roseboros, knew each other very well. Jan and Michael had been introduced by Jan's brother Michael, and they had dated for a year before Michael proposed. Then in 1989, they got married, and Jan took the Roseboro name. Friends who got to know the couple over the years saw a supportive relationship between 2 people who shared similar interests. At least in the early years, that's what they saw. Things started getting a little rocky. So Jan and Michael settled down and began to raise a family. They eventually had 4 children. Now, Jan quit her job with the bank and she became a full-time mom. In late 2007, Jan and Michael moved their family into a house given to them by Jan's parents. Before moving in, they had over $500,000 worth of renovations and additions done. So this must have been some house. I mean...
Oh, giant.
Yeah.
It was already a good-sized house, and then they added on to it with a ton of money.
Yeah, you get this pretty good-sized house, and you add $500,000 worth of renovations.
Yeah, they were pretty loaded, really.
Must have been. Now, Michael was very well liked in the community, and he was trusted to handle most of the funerals there. In fact, anytime someone in the neighborhood died, Michael Roseboro took care of everything. According to some customers, Michael Roseboro was the kindest man they had ever met. But, of course, things are never as perfect as they seem, and in fact, Michael had developed a nasty habit. He cheated on his wife, not just once, repeatedly. Now, Michael Roseboro didn't show off his wealth too much, although he did like his beautiful house, his expensive vacations, his designer clothes, and his luxury SUV. So I'm not sure that means he's not showing off his wealth too much. Anyway.
Well, I guess some of his other relatives were more show-offy than he was.
Okay, so he was the less ostentatious of the family.
Well, at least when it came to, cars and houses and stuff. But he was very into the way he looked. Friends of his would say he dressed like he wanted to be in GQ magazine or something like that. So he definitely had his own vanities.
He did. And actually, he was more into impressing women with his charms and luring them into his bed. The knowledge among family members was that Michael had had many extramarital affairs throughout his and Jan's marriage. But it was something that just wasn't discussed openly. Well, of course not. Michael's father had confronted him a few times and told him to stop sleeping around or he's going to be kicked out of the family business, which would mean that he'd lose money and prestige. Other Roseboro family members had talked to Jan after she found out Michael had cheated on her again, and they told her, you got to live with it. It's the Roseboro way. Now, because Jan loved her 4 kids, and she actually truly believed in her marriage, she put up with a lot. Now, Michael was known in the town of Denver, and again, this is not a large town, but he was well known that he'd had multiple girlfriends over the years, sometimes more than one at a time. I'll keep him busy. Wife and kids at home, couple girlfriends on the side.
Yeah, plus a business to run.
There was even a rumor of an affair with a female cousin at one point.
So as far as we know, Angie Funk was the only extramarital affair Michael was carrying on at the time of Jan's death. But Angie did seem different. She was different than the others for sure. For one thing, the pair seemed to be obsessed with one another. And for another, they were talking about marriage to each other within a month of their first hookup. So Angie had grown up in a very conservative Mennonite family in the town of Quarryville, just outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There's a large Amish and Mennonite community in Quarryville and the surrounding areas. Outsiders might confuse the Amish and the Mennonites. Angie's grandparents wore the Amish clothing and drove a horse and buggy, but then her parents were more modern. As Mennonites, they had the Christian values, beliefs, and roots similar to those of the Amish, but they acted and dressed more like most people. But, of course, they do lean very much toward the conservative end of things in their lifestyle choices.
So I'm sure adultery is not one of those things that they condone.
No, I think most religions don't, really. So Angie lived next door to Michael's parents and just down the block from the Roseboro funeral home. She was a cute woman in her late 30s with brown short hair in a pixie-ish style and a pretty young-looking face. She tended to dress very conservatively, wearing long skirts and prim blouses. And Angie seemed to be living what you would call a wholesome life. She was married to Randall Funk, and they had 2 daughters together. And Angie had a good job as a claims adjuster for a local insurance company. According to Angie, her affair with Michael Roseboro began with an exchange of smiles during a chance meeting at the coffee counter inside a local convenience store. To Angie, neither she nor Michael was feeling loved or appreciated by their spouse, so in a weak moment, she said that it escalated very quickly. But before their romantic relationship began, Angie knew Michael was married and had kids. Michael knew that Angie lived with her husband and her 2 children. Angie's husband, Randall, didn't like to talk much, according to Angie. And one neighbor would later tell the police that Angie would sit on her porch and point at Michael Roseboro as he was walking into the funeral home. And she would say things like, "He'll be mine someday." And this was a long time before they had that cute meat, supposedly, at the convenience store. So although she would tell this story in a joking tone, Angie would admit that she and her girlfriend would walk their children down the street and talk about how cute Michael Roseboro was when they saw him. Once, about 2 years before they hooked up, Angie said to her friend, "I would like to be married to him." So after some self-described encounters at the local store, Angie and Michael began sharing phone calls, emails, text messages, and eventually clandestine meetings for sex, and exchanging promises of a future together someday. So throughout this, Angie would try and kind of paint Michael as the aggressor, but there were other people that pointed to her as the aggressor. So it definitely seems like it was a two-way street.
Well, and if she's talking to folks on her porch and stuff about how he's going to be hers someday.
She definitely was crushing on him for a long time.
Definitely.
Yeah. So once they were together, they would talk about how much they loved being together, not just sexually, but together as a couple, and making a family with their combined 6 children. Within 1 week, they were talking about leaving their spouses and beginning life together. I think they really thought they'd found their soulmate. Seems that way. Now, a lot of it, of course, was lust, though.
I was just going to point that out.
Well, yeah, they didn't really know each other well enough to be in love.
I don't see how.
But Michael told Angie over and over in emails, calls, and texts that he was falling in love with her. But maybe this was more of a game that Michael Roseboro was familiar with. He'd done similar things, played a similar game with other women at different times during his marriage, but it did seem to go further with Angie. It seemed that Angie had become an obsession unlike anything he'd ever experienced. And Angie had done something to him that no other woman had before, so he definitely saw her as special.
He definitely did. Still, while he's obsessing over Angie, at the same time he's making plans to surprise Jan with a vacation to renew their wedding vows. They were going to do it a ceremony in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. He had actually gone on the internet, hired a pastor. He looked for rental homes and venues. He had talked to friends and family who he thought Jan would like to have attend. And at the same time also, Jan and Michael were planning a family trip to Niagara Falls. His affair with Angie could destroy his family life and possibly cause him to lose everything that he, his father, and his grandfather had worked for in the funeral business.
Well, and we already know that his father was more than willing to take the business back.
Yeah. Now, after Jan had found out about an earlier affair, she had told her husband that she had no problem walking out of their marriage with her children and half their assets. So he's been put on notice. He knows that the stakes are pretty high.
Oh, absolutely. So that's what makes you wonder, was he really planning to leave her, or was he plotting to kill her? We don't know. Or maybe she just found out about the affair and she was going to leave anyway. Really, Michael's the only one that will know that.
That's a possibility. I mean, the thing I'm thinking is that he's probably fed this line to a bunch of other women.
Yes, I'm sure. But he seemed to be much more serious about this one.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's because he was being pushed a little bit by Angie.
Maybe, but I mean, hundreds of texts a day. He was pretty obsessive.
Sure was.
Yeah. So Angie and Michael had sex for the first time on June 8th, 2008, in an empty apartment provided by one of Michael's friends. Now, after that, Angie started seeing him at the funeral home. Now, according to her, they mostly chatted as he did paperwork or polished coffins. But she did admit to having sex with him in the parlor area, where they have the viewings of the dead bodies. According to her, it happened just once.
Well, yeah. Just that one time.
But that's like when someone tells you they smoke 1 cigarette a day.
Yeah.
You're going to multiply that by at least 10.
Yeah, or I only have a couple drinks a day.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that it's pretty easy to multiply and get the correct answer.
Right.
Or get more in the neighborhood anyway. So with the exception of a few dead bodies in that basement, I guess it was a place where they felt like they could be alone.
That's for sure.
I would imagine the families of the dead would have been really shocked to know that their funeral director was having sex with his mistress in the same room where they mourned their deceased family member. So pretty weird. But then, just after these 10 days they'd been together, Angie and Michael Roseboro declared their love for each other. And not really together for 10 days, right? They'd just been flirting for like a week and then had sex for a day or two. And then they're in love.
That's all it takes. You just know right away.
Well, that's what they would say. They just knew it.
Yeah.
They talked about finally finding the love of their lives. Michael said he definitely wanted to marry Angie, but they had spouses at home to hide their affair from. They had children to raise, and of course they had all the trappings of real life, all the responsibilities. So they needed to come up with a plan soon, because the sneaking around was not going to work in the long term. Like you said, Dickie, this was a smallish town, and everybody knew the Roseboros.
Well, everybody knows everybody else's comings and goings. Yeah.
Pretty much, yes.
And it's common knowledge that Michael's a serial philanderer. They're not going to keep this tryst a secret very long.
No, probably not. But I don't know if he was delusional or if he was just deluding Angie, because he was really moving quickly with this, to say the least.
I guess.
He started discussing having a wedding on the beach in California. And they looked into going to other places too, like Disneyland, because of course they expected that all the children would attend their wedding. I think that's a little delusional to think that that would happen.
I can tell you for sure that's a delusion.
But Michael insisted that his friends and his children would just love Angie. Angie was a little more realistic. She said, well, they might not love me right away. It might take a while for them to accept me. But Michael just didn't seem worried about that at all. She just seemed more grounded than he was, I guess. She said something to him about Sam, Michael's oldest child, who was 17, and who apparently knew about the affair after seeing a text from Angie on his father's phone one day. So Sam, of course, like Jan's other children, loved his mother. So why would he love Angie? Angie knew he wouldn't, even if Michael didn't. So regardless, the plan Michael and Angie made to be married was to do it within a year. That was going to be some quick moving going on.
No kidding. They got to tell their spouses that they were in love with each other and they needed divorces, and that's going to happen. Boom. I'm not sure that was ever really the plan.
That's the thing. We don't know how much of the truth Angie has told. Was that ever the plan? Was murder the plan? Or was there really no plan and something spontaneous and violent happened? We'll go over the evidence and everybody can develop their own opinion on this. But despite what he was telling Angie, Michael was not trying to find a way to let Jan down easy and get a divorce. So this is what makes me wonder if he was really in on this plan or if he was just stringing along Angie. Because he was really planning to renew their marriage vows on a romantic vacation in the Outer Banks. And also, of course, they were planning that weekend trip to Niagara Falls with the kids to celebrate Sam's high school graduation. Angie wasn't happy about him going to Niagara Falls, and she certainly would not have been happy with the upcoming North Carolina trip if she knew about it. But Michael didn't tell her about that.
Well, I'm sure he didn't.
So I could look at this trip as, yes, he was definitely planning to stay with his wife, even though he was misleading his mistress. Or you could look at it as, well, maybe this was just a way to make himself not look guilty. Because they could say, did you kill your wife? And he could say, well, no, look, I had a vacation plan to renew marriage vows. I've already hired a minister. I love my wife.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good explanation.
I think it might be the latter, yeah.
So on June 17th at 10:20 in the morning, Michael emailed Angie to remind her that he was going to leave at the end of the week for Niagara Falls with his family. Now, Angie said she'd forgotten about his leaving that Friday. She encouraged him to have a good time with the kids only.
Yeah, no good times with the wife, please.
No, ma'am.
No way, sir.
She said it would feel like an eternity while he was gone, even though it's just a 3-day weekend. So Michael ended his next email with words of reassurance that he is going on the trip purely out of obligation to his kids. Angie answered that her biggest fear was that Roseboro was going away to rekindle his romance with his wife. So,
yeah, I could see that.
No kidding. Angie developed a habit of printing out her emails with Michael so she could read them and reminisce about them later. She deleted the emails daily from her inbox and also from the deleted mail folder.
Yes, and she would only email him from her office email, didn't give him her home email address. I guess to make sure that Randall didn't see any of it.
Well, I would think. They probably know each other's passwords and stuff, right?
Yeah, they probably do. There was no email communication between Angie and Michael after he left for Niagara Falls on June 20th until his return on June 23rd. But there were 25 phone calls. 5 were made on Friday, June 20th, 8 on Saturday the 21st, 9 on Sunday the 22nd, and then on Monday the 23rd, when Michael was back in town, they spoke 3 times before they even met up for morning coffee. So those 4 days that Angie didn't see Michael, she said, were very difficult for her. A new string of emails under the subject, "I miss you," was started by Angie. In one, she wrote that any time she spent with her man was a time in her life she cherished with all of her heart. Besides not being able to talk to him whenever she wanted, Angie said she had trouble not being with him physically. And she called him the most amazing man on earth. So she's definitely into him.
I would think.
It's kind of sickening, their letters, for anybody who's not one of them. They're sickening to read.
Well, I think if you were 15 years old, it would read better.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they were being like, is lovesick teens.
Now, Michael Roseboro's cell phone bill for that 1 month that he had been with Angie was $688. The texts and phone calls were that plentiful, and geez.
Yeah, and I guess he didn't know that you need to get a burner phone for that kind of thing, the second cell phone.
Do something. Because what if Jan is the one paying the bills?
She was.
She comes across that one, be having some questions.
Well, and that's a big part of this, yes.
Yeah, because Angie Funk's number was listed over and over.
Of course it was. That's pretty much the only person he was talking to.
Now, according to one close friend, Jan knew about Michael's affair. She didn't know the details, but she had been cheated on enough times that she could recognize the signs. I'll bet she did.
Well, yeah, one friend of hers had overheard her saying to her daughter, "Boy, Dad sure has a lot of paperwork at the funeral home lately." Because he was, staying out, being out at work more often.
Well, all these people were dying.
Yes. Well, she just likely didn't know how consumed with this other woman he had become, though. She might have been really shocked by that. So Jan and her sister Susie were close, and they lived about 3 miles from one another. Susie described her sister as down-to-earth and kind, and for the most part a very happy woman. So Jan owned a cell phone, but she rarely used it. She preferred to spend time with her children or her dogs. When the pool was finally opened on July 4th weekend that year, Jan called up her sister and told her that she should come by and use it anytime she wanted. So she was a very generous, kind person. Jan and Michael had invited Susie, her fiancé, and her family to North Carolina that summer. And there were other family members going as well, also a few friends. Michael said he planned on renewing his vows with Jan down there, and he was making all the arrangements. So he seemed like a really romantic husband. He said it was going to be on the beach, but this is just like he had suggested to Angie for their wedding.
Yeah, I was going to say, that rings a few bells.
So both of these women wanted a wedding on the beach. One a renewal, one a new wedding, I guess.
Well, a new wedding for that couple.
Yeah. So just really living a double life.
Now, on the morning of June 30th, 2008, Angie sat at her work computer and wrote another series of emails to her married lover. Angie said she knew she was going to have to wait, and the thought of having him to herself one day was all that kept her going. Michael answered that he didn't want to wait any longer. Something needs to be done, he said, fast. Now, the topic of what Jan would do when she found out about their affair came up between Michael and Angie more than once. Now, he and Jan had 4 kids, a big house, lots of money, and a family business. So if he left Jan, Michael was certainly looking at potentially losing a lot. Angie realized this, and she was unsure if he was willing to risk everything for her. If she finds out about us, she's going to take the kids and everything, Angie told him. And Michael's concerned about the family business, and he told Angie that he was looking into putting the funeral home in his father's name so Jan couldn't take any of it, but he never did.
Yeah, he didn't do that, so that's another reason I think maybe he was just leading her around.
Could be, but it's something that wouldn't work anyway, I don't think.
Well, maybe not, but I just don't see how he could be making this stuff up because he did seem obsessed with her.
Right.
Back when Michael was having an affair with a different woman, and this was years earlier, Jan had found out about that affair after going through the cell phone bills. Yeah. So when this happened, he discussed the financial consequences of getting a divorce from Jan with an attorney. And when his father found out, he was super angry. His father told Michael that if he continued the affair, the funeral business would be divided into quarters between himself, his mother, his sister, and him. And after that, Michael had real concerns about the stakes of his cheating. He was well aware that he could lose everything. And, after that, he went a couple weeks without sleeping around, but then he was back to his old ways pretty quickly. So on Tuesday, July 1st of 2008, Angie emailed Michael, and they got into a discussion about how the relationship had developed over the past few weeks. She said it was still hard for her to believe that the Michael Roseboro loved her. He responded by telling her that part of the allure driving the relationship was to see what the future held for them. He said he couldn't wait to wake up each morning with Angie and tell her how much he loved her. He added that he knew this was going to happen. So any worry Angie had could be helped by just a few emails from Michael. He was a sweet talker. Plus, Michael, an experienced cheater, was really good at making things seem okay and possible.
Yeah, he's been around this block before, so he might be able to deal with things a little easier.
Yes, he could weave a tale.
I'm sure. 8 days before Jan's death, and this is July 14th, 2008, Michael Roseboro wrote Angie a poem, and he emailed it to her. He titled it, My Heaven. Now, this was just a poorly written, immature poem. It had lines like, I feel your need against my thigh.
Well, that sounds like something you'd read in one of those romance novels.
Yeah, one of those pulp things. God. But Angie loved it. She got real emotional over it.
Well, yeah, she's just looking at him through some rose-colored glasses.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, almost like she can't imagine that the Michael Roseboro is interested in her. It's like she's a high school kid.
Yep.
And the quarterback on the football team is looking at her, yeah.
Exactly. But then totally forgetting the rest of their lives and what they need to deal with.
Exactly.
So, 3 days later, July 17th, Michael wrote to Angie about an idea he had for throwing a party for Angie's 40th birthday, which was still over 5 months away. He wanted it to be a surprise and throw it when she least expected it, so he didn't want to do it around her birthday, which is kind of weird.
Why is he telling her this stuff?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Good question. But he told Angie he'd call her mother and get the names and numbers of her friends and family. He said all this, but didn't give Angie any plan for how and when he was going to divorce Jan. So I think he was just really good at throwing up these distractions like any good con man will.
Yeah.
The way he was making these other fantasy plans made it seem like Jan was already dead or, even worse, that she'd never really existed. She's just out of the picture for him. And then he began searching the internet for wedding dresses for Angie, sending her links and suggesting what kind of dress she should get. So these are delusional people. And we know love can make you foolish, but this is beyond foolish.
Yes. So the day before Jan's death, Michael's emails expressed what would come across as a state of euphoria. There's a sense of contentment and urgency at the same time. He needed to be with Angie all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every morning when he saw her walk into the convenience store, Michael wrote, was like seeing her for the first time.
It was magical.
It was. He seemed unable to separate reality from fantasy or to be able to restrain himself at all. He would repeat phrases over and over, as if this would somehow make what he had to say true, or at least believable, to Angie.
Well, that's kind of like cult leaders do. If you say something enough, people start to believe it.
Yeah.
Now, in reality, Michael was really terrified of losing everything he'd worked for. There was no way he was going to let Jan take his children, his home, or part of the family business. He wanted it all, and he also wanted Angie Funk.
Well, I guess murder's the only option then.
Well, you have to wonder.
Yeah, he did own 95% of the funeral home. And it had been estimated to be worth over $3 million. He had joined the business as a formal partner in 1990, and he was the great-grandson of the founder of the business, that was Harry Mellinger, and it's kind of a big deal in Little Denver, Pennsylvania.
He was.
So, I mean, that's a significant hit. That's a funeral home that he has close to $3 million from.
Yes. But I'm not much of a business person, but for some reason his father still had some control, even though Michael owned 95%.
Well, maybe the father was the CEO or something.
Something like that.
So Michael and Angie talked on the phone 34 different times on the day before Jan's death. They sent 30 text messages and 4 emails to each other. Now, only partial emails could be recovered, so whatever they discussed isn't really known. But things did seem to be ramping up, and Michael had to be feeling the pressure of living a double life. So was Angie plotting to kill Jan Roseboro along with her lover? Help him out? Or was she discussing how they would tell their spouses about their leaving to be together?
Yeah, well, there's really no evidence that Angie was part of a murder plot, but there's certainly plenty of doubts, and there's room for doubt. Michael and Angie met on the morning of July 22nd, as they always did. Afterwards, Michael was at his desk writing his first email of the day to Angie, and this was still before 8 a.m. He wrote about his deep desire that he had never felt before that Angie had brought out in him. And ending the email, he wrote that he adored her and wanted to be with her. Angie wrote back that she couldn't wait any longer to be in his arms every morning when she awoke and every night when she went to bed. They made plans to meet at the vacant apartment that afternoon and have sex. Ending her email, Angie wrote that she couldn't wait for all of her dreams to come true.
Well, let's take a break here, and then when we return, we can talk about the circumstances of the murder of Jan Roseboro, and also to listen to Michael Roseboro's strange, and I think that's an understatement, 911 call.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. So it turns out that this summer may turn out to be almost normal. We returned from a trip up north to spend time with family. We've had barbecues, and we even saw a great movie in an actual movie theater. So this is all just super refreshing. And guess what else is refreshing? Playing Best Fiends. If you want your brain to feel like it's summertime all the time, download Best Fiends. Best Fiends makes my brain feel like it went surfing, catching waves and riding them like a pro. It's a good feeling.
I guess. Best Fiends is definitely way more fun than other matching puzzle games out there. It's a game which makes 30 minutes feel like 30 seconds, and it's totally free to download. Just one complaint, it's way too much fun. I can't stop. It has thousands of puzzles to solve. I'm now on level 375, but there's miles and miles to go.
Absolutely. With Best Fiends, the adorable collectible characters just keep on coming. New challenges, characters, and themes are released all the time. I'm not at level 375, but I'm progressing steadily. It's respectable. One fun thing is how you strategically team up with each character based on their special abilities to gain extra points and items to level up your friends. There's just so much to love about this game. Give it a try, and then let us know if you love it as much as we do.
So download the 5-star rated puzzle game, Best Fiends, free today on the App Store or Google Play. That's Friends without the R. Best Fiends.
So Angie Funk had a pretty good idea that Jan was going to find out about the affair soon. because it was the time of the month in the Roseboro house when Jan paid the household bills. And remember, in the past, by seeing Michael's cell phone bill, she had caught him cheating.
Well, it'd be suspicious if the cell phone bill is like 5 times what it usually is. And there's Angie's number 90% of the time on the bill page.
Yeah, that would be something she might question. Sure.
Yeah, right?
Yes. So before he started emailing, just before 8 o'clock that morning, Michael had called Angie 7 times already, beginning at 5:30 a.m. He called her from his cell phone, then from his home phone, and even from the fax machine at the funeral parlor. So between 5:30 and 8 a.m., on the day his wife would be killed, he had spoken to Angie for a total of 30 minutes already. Angie emailed him a few minutes after 8, saying she had always wondered what life would be like as Mrs. Angela Lynn Roseboro, adding that she wasn't going to have to wonder much longer. So that line was unfortunate considering what would happen that same night. The two texted each other 5 times between 10 and 10:30 a.m. Angie wrote another email to him at 11:01 a.m., telling him how much she missed him and how much she was looking forward to holding him and being with him that day. They texted each other 5 additional times between 11:02 and 11:49 a.m. when Angie called Michael on his cell phone. Then, less than a half an hour later, at 12:26, and then at 1:40, they spoke a total of 8 times by cell phone. Since Michael had woken up at 5:36 a.m. that morning and called Angie, they had communicated over the phone, text, or email 38 times already. So if you listed the times Michael and Angie communicated with each other on July 22nd, not an hour passes without an email, a call, or a text. But between 1:40 and 4:59 p.m., the phone and computer contact between them stopped. And that's because they were inside of that vacant apartment together, pretty much having sex for 3 hours. Between the previous morning, July 21st, and the afternoon of July 22nd, the two had communicated over 100 times. But when interviewed later by the police, Angie told them that she couldn't remember anything they'd discussed. Angie was asked about scratches on Michael's face and if she had seen them that afternoon. Being with him for hours that day, close enough to kiss him and having sex with him. If he had scratches on his face, she should have seen them. But she said no, he didn't have any scratches on his face. And you'll find out why that's significant.
Yes, you will. Now, almost immediately after leaving the apartment in her own car, Angie called Michael's cell phone. So this first call, at exactly 4:59 p.m., was a 2-minute call. Then at 5:05, the next call lasted 36 minutes. Then for the next 40 minutes, there wasn't any communication. And then Michael called Angie's cell phone from his home phone at 5:45. And after that, Angie sent a text and Michael answered her. Then at 6:01, Angie replied, but she got no response from her lover. She sent another text at 6:46, and again Michael didn't respond.
So that's very unusual. This just hadn't happened before.
I'll bet Angie's getting nervous.
I think she was, unless she knew what was going on.
He called Angie's cell phone from his house at 7:19, and they talked for 7 minutes. And at 8:42, he called her back. And during that call, the 8:42 call, they talked about how much they loved each other and their plans to leave their spouses.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like a broken record.
It is. So on the night of Jan Roseboro's murder, Jan's husband, Michael, and Michael's lover, Angie, talked about leaving their spouses to be together.
So could that be a coincidence? It could be, but not likely.
Yes.
So Michael and Angie had actually spent more time together on that afternoon than they ever had before.
And they still wanted to be with each other.
They did, so it must be true love.
Must be.
They ate lunch together and had sex that afternoon, and that evening Michael had to be feeling a lot of pressure to tell Jan about Angie. But remember, he's very afraid of losing that funeral home and whatever else. He could tell her and likely lose his money, job, children, and home, Or maybe he could kill her and try and make it look like an accident. We just don't know what was going through his head. But the last 2 phone calls Angie made to Michael on the night of July 22nd were significant. Between 9:37 and 10:14 p.m., Angie called him 3 times and sent 1 text message. On their final communication that day, Angie sent Michael a text message at 10:14 p.m., and he never responded to any of the calls or the text. So we don't know. Had Angie told him that she was pregnant with his baby? She might have.
Is?
Well, yeah, she could have. Now, she would deny that because she would say she didn't take a pregnancy test or know that she was pregnant until August 1st. But we definitely know it was Michael's baby because her husband had had a vasectomy. And of course, down the road, we would get some DNA testing to confirm that.
Michael Roseboro made his 911 call at 11:02 that night, saying that his wife had drowned in the family pool. There's been a lot of talk about this call, especially regarding Michael's lack of emotion and some contradictory statements that he made. So let's listen and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
Lancaster County 911.
I believe my wife just drowned.
I'm sorry?
I believe my wife just drowned.
Okay. And what happened?
I had gone to bed about an hour and a half ago, and she was outside, and I came out, and I saw the lights were still on the pool, but, the torches were still on. And I came out, and I found her in the deep end of the pool.
Okay. Is she breathing?
No, she's not.
Is she still in the water?
No, I pulled her out.
Okay. Do you want to try to start CPR on her?
I will, yeah.
Okay. Do you need help to do that? I can give you instructions on what to do.
I was lifeguard. I know.
Right. I can walk you through it if you want help.
I want to get her out of the pool.
What's that?
I want to get her out of the pool.
She's still in the pool?
Yeah.
I thought you said she was out of the pool.
No. Oh, my God. I'm sorry. She's out of the pool. Help me through it, please.
Okay. So she is out of the pool?
Yes.
Okay. What I want you to do, is there anybody else there?
My children are asleep.
How old are your children?
12, 9, and 6.
Okay. What we need to do is get her on her back.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have her flipped over onto her back?
She's on her back, yes.
Okay. I want you to check and see if she has a pulse. Do you know how to do that?
I do.
Okay.
There's no pulse.
There is none?
No, there's not.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start the CPR, okay?
Okay.
Keep her head tilted back, pinch her nose closed, cover her mouth with yours, and give her 2 deep, regular breaths, about 1 second each.
Okay.
Is that the siren for the fire department there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, hold on. I can throw up. Please, hold on.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Is there somebody there?
Not yet, no.
Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to start the compressions, okay? Go ahead and put your hand on her chest. I want you to pump her chest hard and fast about 30 times, about twice a second.
Okay.
Okay? Let the chest come up all the way between pumps. And let me know when you've done it 30 times, okay?
Okay.
All right, go ahead and do that.
All right. Okay.
You did it about 30 times?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead and I want you to look in her mouth and see if there's anything in there.
No, there's not.
Okay.
The ambulance is here, sir.
The ambulance is there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Go get them, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
So what do you think?
Well, I know that people have different ways of expressing their emotions, but this is probably the least emotional 911 call I've ever heard.
That is striking about it, isn't it?
It's like he's reading a laundry list or something.
I know. And then also he starts out kind of giving himself an alibi, saying, I went to bed an hour ago.
Yeah, well, that's critical. We got to have that alibi established.
Yes.
Yeah, and then he says he took her out of the pool, but he didn't take her out of the pool.
That's like the most suspicious thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
He says he dragged her out of the pool. Then he says, I'd like to get her out of the pool. Twice he says that.
Yeah.
So that's very suspicious. Also, the mentioning of being a lifeguard seems extraneous. And the times for checking the pulse and giving the compressions seem kind of short, and he doesn't really seem out of breath.
No, and if you've jumped in the pool, pulled your wife out, you've done some chest compressions and some mouth-to-mouth, you ought to be a little more winded.
Yeah, that would really be exhausting. It would be hard to pull someone out of the pool.
Mm-hmm.
She was in the deep end, so close to 6 feet down. He said she was down under the water.
Yeah, so he's got to get her to the surface and then hoist her up over the side of the pool.
Yeah, he sounded pretty cool and relaxed for all that.
Yeah.
So the first responders showed up at the house within a few minutes. We heard the sirens. And the 3 younger Roseboro children were asleep in the house at the time. Michael told the police he'd gone to bed and Jan had stayed out by the pool. Then about an hour later, he noticed that the lights were still on around the pool. He said he went outside to turn off the lights, and then he saw Jan was underwater in the deep end. So he pulled her out, called 911, and gave CPR until the ambulance arrived. So that's his story.
Yeah, but then he's telling the 911 operator that she's still in the water.
Yes.
So...
Well, she could have been in the water anywhere from 1 to 60 minutes, according to that timeline. Michael told the police he'd gone to bed at 10, and 911 call was made at 11:02.
Yeah, well, that's assuming that Jan was alive at 10.
Yes, that's a big assumption. Now, as medics got her inside the ambulance and drove off to the hospital, some blood poured out of the back of her head, turning the pillow bright red, kind of like maybe a blood vessel had burst in her head, because there hadn't been any blood visible on the pool deck or inside the water. Jan was rushed to the hospital where she was pronounced dead just before midnight.
So there wasn't much resuscitation that could be done.
No, the belief is that she was dead for quite a while.
Yeah.
Michael never approached the ambulance at all or asked to ride along with her. He didn't ask anyone which hospital his wife was being taken to, how she was, even if she was alive. Maybe he was still in shock or too upset to react. But this behavior was not what we would expect of someone in this kind of position. Not at all.
No. Here's a crazy thought, probably. He's a mortician, right?
Yeah.
And he deals with death all the time.
He does.
So maybe he's more matter-of-fact about it.
Yes, I could see that. But then you could turn that over and say, maybe it's easier for him to kill then. So that could work for him or against him. Also, he had access to some chemicals that could probably clean up blood pretty well.
Oh, I bet he has plenty of chemicals. Now, family members began to show up pretty quickly at the house. Phone records would show that Michael called his father at home, and then for some reason, he called the funeral home, which is closed. I mean, there's no reason to call it. No one's going to answer. Michael stayed at the house while Jan was taken away. There were many relatives by this time to watch the kids so he could go to the hospital, but he didn't go. He stayed home. Police on the scene didn't see anything out of place. Everything looked normal. The scene didn't appear to be too perfect either, as if someone had cleaned up. The area was well maintained. More than anything else, they were looking for signs that Jan had accidentally tripped on something and fallen into the pool. If that's the case, there had to be evidence left behind indicating that she had slipped and fallen and hit her head. There wasn't anything that indicated that.
Well, the lights inside the pool were on, so it was easy to see the bottom. There was a red cell phone sitting by a pair of reading glasses, and there were 2 small stones. The stones were similar to those in the landscaping around the pool. Michael, who hadn't gone to the hospital, was walking around, being comforted by family members. Near the screened-in porch on the opposite side of the deep end of the pool, police did find a bucket, and when they smelled it, it had a strong odor of a cleaning solution. The fluid was whitish, and there was a rag floating in the bucket.
So it wasn't blood-tinged?
No, I don't think it was. But there are some chemicals that, this sounds stupid saying make blood disappear, but they make it not visible anymore, like peroxide. If you pour peroxide on a spilled blood, it just kind of eats it up. I don't know what the chemical reaction is.
So, and why wasn't there some blood in the pool?
Yeah, I don't know. It almost seems like the wound she had kind of coagulated.
And then opened up again?
And then didn't open up until they were getting her in the ambulance.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's what it seems like, if you believe everyone's descriptions of the night. Now, Mike Texter, he was best friends with Jan and Michael Roseboro's oldest child, Sam. On July 2nd, 2008, after he got out of work at 9 p.m., Mike went to the Roseboro house, and he arrived around 9:30. He parked his car in the gravel section of the driveway, which was near the pool, and Sam met him outside. He walked around the pool toward the screened-in porch, and he said hello to Michael and Jan, who were sitting near each other on the deck, and he would say that all the lights were on. Mike and Sam went into the pool house, got something to eat, watched a little TV, and then they went out back to the patio after another friend came by, and they decided to go swimming at a fourth friend's house that was nearby. When they left, it was 10:05 p.m. Michael was sitting on the steps inside the pool with his arms out along the edge and half his body underwater. Jan was lying on the deck in back of him, supposedly looking at airplanes or the stars. The tiki lamps, the pool lights, and the floodlight in the back of the house that was in the garage area were all on, and after swimming for an hour at the other friend's house, the boys were getting ready to go to McDonald's for a late-night snack. Mike, Texter, and Sam heard sirens, and then they wondered what was going on. Then Sam heard that an ambulance was at his house, so he and Mike took off for Sam's house to see what was going on. Once they got there, Mike noticed that Michael was wearing the same red swim trunks that he had on when he was sitting in the water about an hour earlier. Realizing that Jan was in an ambulance on her way to the hospital, Sam and Mike went into the house to find out what had happened.
So he said that he had gone to bed. He was going to sleep in his bathing suit?
Well, that's one of the things about his story that doesn't really pan out.
I'm a little slow. I just picked up on that.
Yeah. So the first officers responding had asked a few people at the Roseboro's home if Jan had been drinking that night. Because usually if something like this happens, it's someone who's drunk or on drugs. It just doesn't normally happen to a normal adult.
Exactly.
Now, it did seem like she hadn't been drinking. There was no evidence of it, no empty glasses or bottles of alcohol. And according to Michael, Jan liked going out and looking at the stars sitting by the pool. Now, the police initially believed that they could figure out a logical explanation for this accident. Maybe Jan had fallen and hit her head while she was out there by herself, or maybe she'd had some medical problem like a heart attack. So outside around the home, all those lights were on, and the grounds of the entire Roseboro home were always lit up, according to neighbors and friends and family. Especially because it was summer, the kids had been staying up till 11, 12 at night normally. And they'd be out there playing and making noise until sometimes 10 or 11. But for some reason that night, the younger children had gone to bed early.
Jan Roseboro was pronounced dead at 11:57 p.m., but no one had told Michael that. He had no idea what was going on with her, but at the same time he never asked. He hadn't driven to the hospital. He hadn't asked to go in the ambulance. He had not gotten any information on her condition. Yet it just seemed that everyone walking around was under the impression that she had died. Michael had told someone in a group of family members and friends at the scene that his wife had died. Now, he said this without knowing that for sure.
Well, yes, but it's kind of a safe assumption in some ways. Of course, if you're the spouse, though, I don't think you'd assume something like that.
No.
You'd be hoping for her to be resuscitated.
She was severely injured and pulseless, so I guess you could infer from that she was dead.
Yeah. Well, when a detective arrived and evaluated the scene, he found it really odd that Michael Roseboro was still at the house. He seemed to be engaging with the crowd in almost a casual way and showing no concern about getting to the hospital, no need to go to his wife's side, nothing like that. He was in the back of the house inside the screened-in porch, surrounded by family, and now this included his oldest son, Sam. Those other 3 children were still sleeping. Around 30 people were roaming around that scene, including family, friends, medics, fire personnel, neighbors. And even with all this going on, the children didn't wake up. So this would later lead to some speculation that maybe Michael had drugged the younger kids with Benadryl or something like that so they would sleep through it.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Now, there wasn't anything unusual about the police being there. It was protocol, unexplained death, and that had to be explained. Although Michael was with family, he seemed uninterested in finding out what was going on with his wife. So a detective called the hospital for information. He was told that Jan had a deep puncture wound behind her left ear that was about 1 centimeter in diameter. So it's possible that it was a gunshot wound. Her body was x-rayed, and there was no sign of any gunshot or bullets, any of that.
No, and after examining the scene, the police found no blood anywhere outside. So could she have fallen, hit her head hard enough to get such a severe wound and not leave any blood behind? Now, it did begin raining hard off and on that night, and one of those downpours, it was one of those downpours that seemed to come out of nowhere and then just abruptly stop and then start again. So the rain could have washed away the blood, concealing where Jan had fallen. And also there was that bucket of cleaning fluid to consider. Of course, if the cleaning fluid had been used, then Jen's death was not an accident at all, because if someone's cleaning it up, something has happened, like murder.
Yeah, I'm still having a tough time explaining how there wasn't blood in the pool.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
Yeah.
Although a little blood might just dissipate in the water, and you might not know.
But what you were describing when they had her in the ambulance was that it was soaking the pillow she was on.
Yes, but they also said they didn't see it until they got in there, and it was like a burst vessel.
Okay.
So that's why I was thinking maybe there was a clot forming that had broken loose.
Sure, I guess that could happen.
Now, detectives asked Michael to come down to the police station and help them clear up what had happened. One detective noticed that Michael kept dabbing at his face and that there was something oozing from an area around his chin and upper lip. There was oozing coming out of his upper lip, and he kept wiping at it with his finger, so it looked like oozing blood, like maybe he did have some injuries on his face. But at that point, the detective didn't bring it up. I think they were giving him a little more benefit of the doubt because of his standing in the community.
Well, yeah, he's an upstanding community member. Now, toxicology tests on Jan's blood were going to take some time. Now, you're never sure if somebody could be a closeted alcoholic or drug user. So they needed to find out what had happened, but at this point, they didn't think that there was a crime. Michael went over the evening and what had happened when he found his wife in the pool. He said that he walked outside in his boxer shorts to blow out the tiki torches and noticed that his wife was in the bottom of the pool. So he jumped in, swam down into the deep end, grabbed a hold of her and pulled her out. Then he called 911. Now, he must have been out of breath after that and probably frantic. But once the 911 call was listened to, detectives would know that he didn't seem at all short of breath or upset. And this is all from a guy who's a heavy smoker, heavy drinker, who just didn't exercise.
Right.
So
he should have been very out of breath.
He'd be one to get drowned by trying to rescue his wife.
Yeah, have a heart attack and drown with her. Well, after consulting the DA, police asked Michael for his consent to do a walkthrough of the house. They've got no evidence of a crime at this point, so they couldn't get a search warrant yet. After 2 a.m., the interview with Michael was still going on. He told the detective that his wife took 10 to 20 milligrams of Adderall every day, but no other medications. So Adderall, it's an amphetamine, stimulates the central nervous system, pretty much prescribed for narcolepsy or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or attention deficit disorder. And according to Michael, Jan had been diagnosed with ADD and needed the medication just to maintain a stable mood, a stable life. Jan didn't drink anything, but I had a few beers, Michael said. When asked about their marriage, he said it was good. He did not mention his affair with Angie. He added that he and Jan had a plan to renew their vows on the beach in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. They were going to go on the 10th to the 17th of August, and when asked, he agreed to a walkthrough of the house, and he signed the consent form. So it's interesting to me that he volunteered about the vow renewal.
Well, yeah.
But kept the affair a secret.
That's going to put him in a better light, talking about renewing their vows.
Sure, but if it was an accident, why would you need to plant yourself in a better light? You should just be honest, I would imagine.
Yeah, he wasn't thinking that way.
So not once during that interview did Michael ask about the status of Jan. It was 3 to 4 hours after Jan had been taken from her home in an ambulance, and he had never asked about her. And of course he hadn't gone to the hospital either. In fact, not once did Michael, or even any one of his family members or friends, call the hospital to see if Jan was alive, and no one had asked if or when Jan had been pronounced dead. So that's really bizarre.
To me, it's bizarre, not so much that her husband wasn't doing that, but none of the relatives or friends.
Right. You would think if a husband's distressed, then another family member would do that.
Yeah.
Or they'd take him to the hospital. But for no one to show up or call, it's very strange.
It is to me.
So it was a woman with a big family around, well-loved, a lot of people. So it's really odd that they were all just kind of supporting him and not checking on her. That gives me a bad vibe about the whole relationship.
Yes. Now, the wound that Jan had on the back of her head turned out to be a deep gash that was shaped like the letter L. And this is on her scalp behind her left ear. And it tunneled to her skull. So this is not a wound that could happen easily, that's for sure. The doctor and detective were convinced there had to be evidence somewhere around the house explaining how Jan had received such an injury, because you couldn't get an injury like this one without leaving a clue as to how it got there. Mainly blood somewhere, or hair, but there should be some signs. Now, as the doctor began the autopsy, he kept an open mind about the cause of death. But the more he looked at Jan's body, the more it appeared that she had been murdered. He took scrapings from underneath her fingernails and put them in evidence bags to send to the forensic lab. He noted that Jan had short fingers. And on her left hand, he was able to obtain scrapings from just 4 of the fingers. That's because several years back, Jan had bought a juicing machine, and she had a misadventure with it, and stuck her hand into it, and it ground her left middle finger down past the cuticle.
Ooh,
That must have hurt like hell.
that must have been awful.
That wasn't just a quick slice. It was down to the
Ground it down.
nail bed. Wow. So she, as a result, had no left middle fingertip. And this is going to become an important piece of evidence. After he finished documenting all of the bruises and abrasions on Jan's body, the doctor doing the autopsy began his internal examination.
Yeah, so after he shaved her head, he saw that the wound to her scalp was worse than they had thought. So he made an incision with his scalpel above Jan's forehead, back down over each ear, and peeled the scalp back from Jan's head. This exposed her skull and the tissue underneath her scalp. With her scalp pulled back off her skull, the coroner could see that she had actually been beaten over the head and killed. It was very clear to him. This wasn't just a few bruises in a certain part of her head where she may have bumped it, like if she'd fallen. There were sections which showed violent contusions obtained before her death. So he had no doubt that she had been beaten over the head. Now also her body had no abrasions or bruises from being dragged from the pool. If Michael had pulled her out in a hurry to save her life, she should have had some scrapes on the trunk of her body or her legs. So once the examiner opened up Jan's neck, he found bruising along the area of the carotid arteries on each side of her neck. So she'd been choked too at some point close to her death. Then inside of her chest, he found a frothy substance coming from her lungs. So Jan had been alive when she went into the pool, and she had actually drowned. She had been beaten, strangled, and put in the water to die. So Jan's death was ruled a homicide by multiple head injuries, strangulation, and drowning. With this new information, detectives went back to talk to Michael again. There were 2 scratches on the left side of his mouth and 1 on the right side. And the number and placement of the scratches they thought were very significant because Jan had that 1 fingertip missing. It was really just a stub. So if she had scratched her husband's face with that hand, it would leave only 3 scratches as opposed to what you would normally see would be 4. So about an hour into this interview, Michael said he had to work on Jan's obituary, so he couldn't talk anymore. But he agreed to go to the police station later to talk more. As they walked away from the house, it again astonished the detectives that Michael had not asked 1 single question of them about what happened to his wife. And when he arrived at the police station that evening, he was told that Jan had been beaten and drowned, and that her death had been ruled a homicide. But according to the police interviewers, Michael showed no reaction at all to this news. Didn't even seem surprised by that.
So search warrants were signed by a judge on July 24th, 2008. The warrants stipulated some of the items they were looking for as trace evidence, including hair fibers, blood, bodily fluids, fingerprints, and anything with bloodstains. They processed the pool area, patio, and any other common area for blood spatter. Now, the fact that it had rained so heavily the night before and throughout the next day made the possibility of finding blood slim. And after photographing the inside and outside areas of the house, they worked in the backyard. And in the pool area, it looked like people had been hanging out at the pool since the murder. So it's disturbing to think of family members and friends enjoying the pool where Jan had been found dead just days before.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would still be the same water that she had died in.
Yeah.
I just see some disrespect here, like maybe the family and friends, aside from Jan's family and her children, didn't really respect her.
Yeah,
because
there's
not checking on her.
here.
Yeah, it's just weird the way they were kind of circling Michael as if they were protecting him, and then being disrespectful and very nonchalant about her death.
Yeah, I know.
It's disturbing to me. One neighbor seemed to care more. She told the investigators that she was disgusted because she looked out and saw kids and adults swimming in the pool in the days after Jan had been found dead there. So that's just so disrespectful. I don't get it. This was supposed to be a lovely woman that people cared about, but was Michael really just running things, it seems?
Get that impression. So even after they sprayed the whole pool deck area with blood detection chemicals, investigators could find no trace of blood. So if Jan had bled outside, someone had to know what he or she was doing when they cleaned it up. The accidental slipping theory that Jan could have fallen on a planter, split her head open, and then fell into the pool and drowned just didn't have the evidence to support it.
Well, especially with the autopsy results.
Right.
That kind of does him in.
Yeah, I mean, she got bashed in the head.
Oh, yes, terrible.
And not one hit, several hits.
Yeah, there was definitely a struggle.
Yeah. So there goes the tripping and falling aspect.
Yes.
So, and it's possible that Jan could have been killed inside the house and then brought outside.
Sure.
But at this point, investigators had no motive. They had little in the way of circumstantial evidence, and they had absolutely no forensic evidence.
Well, yeah, they don't even know about the affair.
Not yet.
Now, police decided to canvass the neighborhood, and there was a house directly across the street from the Roseboro pool. If a person stood on the second story and looked out a window, they directly saw into the Roseboro pool area. So a couple lived there with the initials SM and JM with their 3 Siberian Huskies. SM had a routine with the Huskies. The last time to go outside was at 9, so she took them out herself each night, and because she worked the night shift at the Denver Pepperidge Farm plant, she took the dogs out, got her lunch ready, and then left her house at 10:15 p.m. So her car was parked in the garage, and when she left, she'd drive out of her driveway, and she'd be looking straight at the Roseboros' yard. So on the night of Jan's murder, SM said that the Roseboro house was pitch black. There were no cars in the driveway. There weren't any lights on outside at all, which was very unusual, because the Roseboros always had that backyard lit up. So as SM was getting ready to go to work, she was looking out at the Roseboros' backyard, and this was around 10 p.m. So Michael had said that he left Jan outside at that time and that all the lights had been on, supposedly so Jan could enjoy the night sky. But SM said that she could see the pool and the house. She could see that the tiki lights were out, and all the other lights were out as well. Not even that light on the overhead garage, which is turned off only by a breaker switch or by unplugging it, was lit. So that seems very purposeful.
It certainly does. Then there's a second neighbor who had been driving by the house at 10:35 that night, the night Jan was murdered, and this neighbor also reported that the backyard was completely dark. So here we've got 2 separate witnesses who didn't know each other making the same observation. And the second witness also said that the front of the house was dark, and usually that was lit up too. I guess the Roseboros like to have lights on.
Yeah. Well, when you have 4 kids, it's kind of understandable. Plus, it was summer, so there was a lot of partying and good times with the family out there. The pool was new. It had just been opened.
Oh, yeah. Got to use it.
Yes. Michael Roseboro said the only reason he went outside that night was because he saw the tiki lights were still lit. So if an intruder had gotten into the backyard and killed Jan, does that mean the intruder relit those tiki torches? That made absolutely no sense. I suppose you could decide that Jan had turned off the lights so she could see the stars and the airplanes in the sky better. But then what kind of killer is going to walk around and relight the torches after they murder somebody? It's just not probable or even believable. Soon the police got a phone call from a lawyer who Michael had hired. Then the same day a call came in from someone who knew Angie Funk, and this person told the police that something was going on between Angie and Michael. So here was the motive they'd been looking for. And it was easy to find Angie. She was a married mother of 2 who lived just 1 block away from Roseboro Funeral Home. Detectives went to Angie Funk's home, which looked out on the business sign of the funeral home, the employee entrance, and the garage. And also, Michael Roseboro's parents lived right next door to Angie.
Yeah, so if she is having an affair with a man whose wife had been murdered, then why hadn't Angie called the police and told them? Well, I know. Why admit that?
Well, I think if you're a concerned citizen, you would. But, yeah, I see what you're saying.
But Angie now told the police that she and Roseboro had planned on getting married. According to Angie, her affair with Michael began with a smile and a chance meeting near the coffee counter inside a convenience store. It escalated quickly, and it quickly became all-consuming.
Sure. And then Angie said that she told Michael on August 1st, 2008, that she was pregnant. So they'd used condoms as birth control, she said, but she talked about a condom breaking or coming off. She couldn't recall exactly what had happened. Michael said that maybe she should have an abortion considering the circumstances of his wife just dying and all that, but she wouldn't even consider it. She was going to have Michael Roseboro's baby, and there was nothing he could say to change that. She was actually pretty excited about it. So Angie had called the police when she found out and told them that she was pregnant with Michael's baby, and she made a strong point of saying that she just found out that it was after Jan's murder. She wanted to make that clear. Police arrested Michael for the murder of his wife the next day, August 2nd. They wanted DNA and fingerprints from him. According to the warrant, Michael Roseboro had intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or negligently caused the death of his wife, Jan Roseboro. Michael's attorney's theory about Jan's murder was that it was a robbery by someone she didn't know. Just a random person came by.
The random dude. And
Yes.
just happened to go into their house to rob them.
So days after her death, Michael decided to bring this up with the police. And now he claimed that Jan had been wearing $40,000 in jewelry out by the pool that night, and that it was gone when he pulled her from the pool. But this is the first time he mentioned that. Jan was wearing very casual clothing of a hoodie and shorts, and a friend of hers recalled seeing her earlier that day at the bank. She wasn't wearing any jewelry, and she was wearing the same hoodie and shorts she'd been found in the pool wearing. So if you're going to believe that it was a robbery, you're going to have to think she came home in her hoodie and shorts and decided to put on the $40,000 worth of jewelry to wear by the pool.
Yeah, I can see when you put it that way, it sounds a little incredible.
It does, and by pretty much every account, she was not the kind of person who dressed up and wore jewelry normally in the middle of the day. She was more of a casual person. But Michael and his supporters would claim that it was definitely a robbery. Michael had not killed Jan, but a stranger had done it, and the stranger had stolen her jewelry, so that's who they wanted the police to look for.
Right. The one-armed man. At trial, the DA put much of its focus on Angie Funk. And Angie took a lot of heat from both sides. I'm sure she did during the trial. Neighbors had reported that Angie had been seen pushing Michael's baby Matthew in a stroller past the funeral home and Michael's parents' house.
Yeah, so she'd given birth while he was in jail.
The DA said about Angie and her feelings toward Michael that he was like a rock star to her. He discussed the thousands of phone calls, texts, and emails exchanged between Angie and Michael in a relatively short time.
Very short time. This is all like within 5 weeks.
Well, you meet your
Around
soulmate,
there.
you know it.
Yeah, I guess so.
A full-time detective on the case testified and explained the lighting on the Roseboros' property to the jury, and this was at some length. This testimony supported the prosecution's determination that it would be impossible for an intruder to turn out every light after cleaning up a crime scene. He also explained a series of photos showing the inside and outside of the Roseboro home. Detectives also described the second interview with Michael Roseboro. He was asked to give the police more details about how they had found Jan. The defense attorney tried everything he could to raise doubt in the jury's minds, but detectives testified that Michael had seemed evasive, unemotional, and not at all upset by the loss of his wife of 19 years.
Yeah, and in day-to-day life, that's significant, but I would say as far as the law and his innocence, I can't judge him on that. Especially, like you said, he's probably more used to death than the average person. And maybe he's used to being calm. So even though I don't like it, I don't think that could really be used against him too much. Although they certainly tried.
Well, I would.
Yeah. Well, the defense attorney talked about how Michael had pulled Jan from the pool and tried to save her. Then he talked about Sam and the other 3 children, how they all got along so well, and how distressed Michael was when Sam and his friend returned to find the police and the family at the house with Jan on her way to the hospital. Michael had cooperated with the police from the beginning, his attorney said, and there was no evidence to indicate a murder, which certainly wasn't true, but the defense had hired medical experts who were willing to contradict the state's expert.
A really convincing witness for the prosecution was a Dr. Ziebert, and he had cared for Jan when she was taken to the hospital. The doctor described the scene at the hospital on the night she was brought in. He said it was his decision to stop CPR because Jan was dead and there was no hope of bringing her back. The other key piece of information Dr. Ziebert offered was his shock that no one had called the hospital to check on Jan's status. And Michael Roseboro also never showed up to see his wife and talk to her doctor. And Ziebert said he had never experienced that before.
No, that is really weird.
Yes.
In July of 2009, after his 3-week jury trial, Michael Roseboro was convicted of first-degree murder, which carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. I disagree with the jury's decision, Roseboro said after the verdict was read, but I respect it. Oh, that was big of him.
I guess so.
The Pennsylvania Superior Court denied Michael Roseboro's appeal of his first-degree murder conviction for killing his wife. His attorney appealed the conviction, arguing that a new trial should be granted, and this was based on the comments of 2 jurors who had posted on Facebook. According to the appeal, the 2 young jurors ignored the court's instructions not to discuss the case with anyone during the trial and interfered with Michael Roseboro's legal right to a fair trial. The panel of 3 judges concluded in an 11-page opinion that the comments were not enough to warrant a new trial. So according to the court records, one of the jurors stated he was depressed by learning how and why the murder happened, and later made posts complaining about the length of the trial, and in response a friend had commented, "Fry the defendant." Another juror wrote on Facebook that jury duty blows, but they decided that wasn't enough, and I agree, that's not a lot.
Particularly that second one, jury duty blows. I mean, that's nothing.
Yes. Now Michael is serving his sentence in the state prison near Mahanoy City. Jan's sister Susie Van Zandt took custody and raised the younger Roseboro children. Susie honored Jan's memory by creating the Jan Roseboro Foundation to help children of domestic violence victims. So that's a wonderful thing to do.
Very nice.
TCB's music is written and produced by Tristan Capel. If you have comments, a case suggestion, a beer recommendation, pretty much anything, email it to us at truecrimebreweri@tiegrabber.com, or you can leave us a voicemail, and your voicemail may be played on an upcoming episode. We'd love to hear from you with any suggestions you have. If you'd like to get all your future TCB episodes commercial-free, get an extra members-only episode each month, and have us send you a gift with a thank you note and some swag, you might want to consider subscribing at tiegrabber.com for our premium show. When you join, you'll have immediate access to all our bonus episodes from the past 4 years. Plus, all our other episodes will come to you without any of the ads. We also have a Patreon page where you can subscribe for ad-free and bonus content. If you're interested in that, just go to patreon.com/tiegrabber to learn more. Also, if you do enjoy our show, we would really appreciate your leaving a review of the show on iTunes or wherever you listen. Let's get started with feedback. So our first voicemail is from Shelley.
Hi, Jill. Hi, Dick. My name is Shelley, and I live in Owensboro, Kentucky, across the river from Evansville, Indiana. In 2016, a huge disappearance took place in Evansville, involving a severely disabled young adult named Aaliyah Beckerly. Aaliyah was nonverbal, prone to seizures, and used a wheelchair. Aaliyah disappeared in the middle of the night, and her wheelchair was left behind. Even though the family was sleeping just one room away, they claimed they heard nothing during the night. This case involves a little bit of everything, from the search of a landfill, a beating, even a false confession. It took 2 years for the case to come full circle. Community outrage vilified the family, and allegations swirled on social media. Who would want to hurt such a vulnerable person? The shocking conclusion will leave you astounded. I feel this is a unique and interesting case with a lot of rabbit holes. As for a beer, I would recommend Bo and Luke, an imperial stout out of Louisville, Kentucky. You will love it. Keep up the good work. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Shelley. That does sound interesting. And I think maybe we won't tell any of the outcomes of this one so that we can cover it.
Right.
I don't think I want to give it all away, I'm saying.
That's fine.
Okay.
Because we're going to look at
Yeah, because it sounds like a really offensive crime.
Well, this poor kid, and I say kid, she's 19,
Well,
but she was like the size of a 5-year-old.
oh, that's really sad.
She was really developmentally delayed. I think it'd be a good case. I would just one final note for Shelley. I've had Bo and Luke. Good beer.
All right, great. So if we do the case, we can do that beer if you can find it.
Yeah.
Great. So next we have a case suggestion from Diane.
Hi, Dick and Jill. This is Diane calling from the Great Prairie of Minnesota, southern Minnesota, near the Iowa and South Dakota border. I am a retired paramedic. My husband is a district court judge here. He practiced criminal defense law for 22 years. And I think after all the podcasts I've listened to, he's pretty much convinced that I might be up to some nefarious things soon. But just joking, we've been happily married for almost 30 years now. But anyway, just wanted to let you know that I very, very much enjoy your podcast. The research is wonderful. Your production and presentation is so engaging, despite the topics. And I did have a case that you might be interested in. And it's happened in 2017, and you can find it. It happened in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia, where I grew up, and my husband is from New Jersey, so this really hit home for us. The man convicted of these murders is named Cosmo DiNardo, and on Discovery ID, you can find a show called The Lost Boys of Bucks County. And, it was it hit home because Bucks County is a very, very nice area to live, and the low crime rate, and these crimes were so heinous. And there were missing young 20-year-olds for quite some time. Sadly, no beer recommendations because we don't get a lot of good beer out here on the prairie, and my husband will only drink Newcastle Brown Ale and Guinness Stout. So, but anyway, thank you so much for your podcasts. They are engaging. I enjoy them. And
Oh, okay. So Diane was cut off. But thank you, Diane, very much. We appreciate that. What do we know about this crime? Anything you'd like to say about it?
Well, these killings, there are 3 killings. 2 of the victims were together at the time they were killed. DiNardo was a schizophrenic on and off medication, and he was dealing marijuana. And these boys, young men, We're going to buy some marijuana from him. Fairly good quantities. I think the first one was going to buy 4 pounds of marijuana.
Wow, so not personal use, probably.
Don't know.
Sounds like maybe they were going to sell some.
And his excuse was that he thought that he was going to be robbed 3 times.
Oh, right. Three events.
4
men, 3 events, right? Okay, well, sure, I'll look into that some more. That does sound interesting, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
So now we have a couple emails.
I'll do this one. You can do the next. So this first one is from Yvette, who says, I would love to hear you do an episode on the Kendra Hatcher case. I found your YouTube channel by chance a couple months ago and have been a fan ever since. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Yvette.
Thank you. Kendra Hatcher was a pediatric dentist, and she was killed in 2015. And it turned out that the person who killed her was a hitman hired by her boyfriend's former girlfriend. So she's having a little trouble letting go. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay. So our next email is from Audrey. And Audrey writes, 3-year-old Marcus Fiesel goes missing. His foster mother told police she had 4 or 5 kids at the park. It was a hot and humid day in Cincinnati, and she got dizzy and blacked out. She said when she came to, Marcus was gone. So the community was distressed, of course. They had many searches to no avail. The foster parents did multiple news interviews and press releases. The foster mother/father seemed distraught and held nothing back about their unconventional personal life. Airing their dirty secrets gave them an aura of believability for a time. I won't reveal the rest of the story as it's almost too unbelievable to be true. That is horrifying.
I would just say there has to be a special place in hell for people who do this to a kid.
Yeah, what's wrong with people? And these are supposed to be foster people, so these kids are already at risk and need someone to care for them.
Yeah.
So, suffice it to say, the foster parents were responsible for doing something to this little boy. Her story was a lie, which it sounds like a lie.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
They went to a wedding or something. The story about how she had gotten faint and passed out briefly.
Yeah.
Totally a lie.
Well, sure. But were they at the park?
No, they were at a wedding or something for 2 days. They left the little kid home.
Okay.
And I'll leave it there.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yes.
Okay, really horrible. Don't think I'll cover it, but Audrey, I do appreciate you writing in. So one thing I wanted to say is every month we do a premium episode for our subscribers that support the show. And this month, Dick is going to do something interesting. Want to tell us about it?
Sure. I'm going to take a few cases that has some follow-up to them. I know that Lori, what's her name, Daybell?
Yeah.
There's some interesting stuff on her. I've looked, I got 4 or 5 other episodes that we've done that would be good to follow up on. So we'll be doing something.
Yeah, and what I was going to do is just throw out a request. If anybody has updated information on a case we've covered that you'd like to share, we could certainly do that. And that could be part of our show.
Could be.
So if you have any updates, feel free to email them to us or call in with a voicemail and talk about them.
Definitely.
That'd be great too. Well, thank you everyone for joining us at the Quiet End today. It's great to be back, and we'll see you next time.
We will. We'll save a chair for you at the bar.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, guys.